Hey, what's happening, guys? So, you see the wood grain right here. You know it's time for another review, specifically a controller this time. So, as some of you may know, I am no stranger to third-party controllers. I have reviewed plenty of controllers on this channel, and I'm kind of looking for the end-all perfect controller. And it's not going so well so far, but I've found some close entries. So, for example, let me show you two of the ones that I've covered before. Previously, this is actually the first one I ever reviewed on this channel. The F710 holds a special place in my heart. The original I had, well, this is actually it. I got a second one because I lost the receiver for this one, because I didn't realize, like, hey, there's a receiver place for this in the back. So I purchased another one and resynced it, and yeah, it's working pretty well. And then we have the Gamester over here. The G3S, I really like this controller. It's a nice, it's not as well built as the others, but the level of functionality for the price is unbeatable. You have Android, iOS, and PC support built into a very small form factor with pretty decent buttons overall with great tactile feedback. I'll have a link to both of these controllers' reviews in the description, although I will warn you that the Logitech one, I still consider myself pretty bad at reviewing controllers. But the Logitech one was like my first one, so it's a little bit amateur, a little bit more so than usual. But those controllers are not what we're here to talk about today, even though I do think they set a lot of the standards that we have today for how to properly make a wireless controller that wasn't already done by Microsoft or Sony. So here we have it, the SteelSeries Stratus XL. Now there is a version available for Apple products, for macOS and iOS. This is the PC and Android version, and let's have a look at the unit. Now, hardware-wise, this thing is actually quite impressive. So, the sticks are arguably better than some of the ones on the main consoles. They feel incredible. They are not, like, mushy when you click them. They're not too fast, not too, like, stiff. They don't grate when you move around the side, which is something I can't, don't want to destroy my camera. It's under the cord. The Xbox controller is having, in fact, Gamster's controller had that, like, it's like start making this little grating feel to it when you move it around the outside. Or on the inside, I should say. But, yeah, the control sticks are great. The buttons are a flat surface, but they are very tactile. Feel very good. Select and start are unfortunately just above the sticks instead, like not right here. They should be right here next to the LED indicator that tells you if the controller is on, what it's synced up to, what controller is it. So it'll be like controller 1, 2, 3, or 4. But yeah, that is a little bit of a problem because sometimes if you're aggressive with your controller, you can accidentally like push the stick when you're moving to hit the button. I haven't had that happen too much. It's very rare, but not everyone's thumbs and how they play games, it's not all the same. The D-pad is probably the best third-party D-pad I've ever used on a third-party controller ever. It's, well, I really shouldn't be saying third-party for PC, because what first-party controller is there other than kind of maybe not really the Steam controller? Anyway, so the D-pad on this thing is really nice. It's huge. That's my biggest problem, though. Like, it's very easy to click in the middle, which is a problem, but you kind of have to slide your finger across it. But other than that, it's very accurate in that, like, when you're going to hit a button, like, the problem I had with the Gamester controller is that when I was playing Dark Souls and I was, like, moving to switch to something, Dark Souls is very frantic because you can't pause it, so, like, when I would go to switch something, sometimes I would, like, hit left instead of, like, up. And I would, pick the wrong item, or I'd switch out one of my items instead of selecting, like, the right spell. So this thing, not a problem, because, well, mainly it's because it's big and it's very responsive. I really like it. It's a good D-pad. Not the best, but it could be a little bit smaller for a lot of games to get a good advantage of it, but it is pretty decent. On the top of the unit, we have 2 buttons, and 2 bumpers, and 2 triggers. I almost said just 2 buttons. Anyway, so you have your sync button, which actually, if you hold this thing down, it'll reset the controller, so it'll just, like, dump all, like, its settings for all the things it's synced up, so that's nice in case you need to troubleshoot it. You have a button that lets you select, like, which controller it's going to be, like player 1, player 2, player 3, player 4, and I believe it's also for switching between devices. You have your R1 and L1, which are decent enough. Now there's a little lip, a little bump between the triggers and the bumpers so that you don't accidentally hit one or the other. And there's also a dead zone right here where you can't press it, so you have to press it like right here. So that's nice. The triggers are pretty bulky. And honestly, they don't have a lot of resistance to them. Like, it feels very loose when you push them down, but they are acceptable for what they are. They're not horrible triggers, even though they are a little bit more responsive than the GameSir ones in a way for some games. One problem I have with the GameSir triggers is that I didn't mention this in review, but later on when I was playing Shadow of Mordor, some games became the point in that game where it became unplayable was when you ever had to draw the bow. Like, it would just jitter between not using the bow and using the bow. It was a problem. I'm having no such issues here. Speaking of issues, oh boy, here we go. So I had a lot of QA trouble with this thing. So the first controller had sticky bumpers. The second one wouldn't sync properly. The third one had issues with the analog triggers, and then eventually stopped syncing. And then now this one has, well, it had an issue. So I connected it, and I paired it with the software, which we'll talk about later. And it paired to my computer just fine with Bluetooth. And then it didn't pair with the software. Then I decided, maybe it's my Bluetooth. So I connected my PS4 controller via Bluetooth, and then all of a sudden it started working again. And that's never happened before, whereby I had to plug in a second controller in order for it to work. It registered as control number 2, and then when I reset my computer, it synced up automatically. Maybe it needed to see another controller being synced up so it knows how it's done. Like, oh, now I get it, yeah! So, that was a problem. Comfort-wise, it feels great in your hands. It's pretty bulky. Kind of reminds me of the Xbox One controller, though it is a little bit lighter. If I can just get that into frame. There we go. So, you also have a on and off switch on the back. Nice that it's dedicated. I hate it when you have to hold down a button to turn a controller off. It's really annoying. Just have a switch. It's a nice little feature. And you also have the battery compartment. It comes with 2 alkyne batteries, and you're getting about 10 to 12 hours of battery life, at least. With the alkyne batteries with Duracell, you probably get something like 14 or 15. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, who knows. Nope. It's hard to find information to test this stuff online, and I only just got through the alkynes recently. Now, you might notice, like, why'd you take the batteries out? Well, if you actually look very carefully, you'll see there's a USB port inside there. So let's talk about some of the features of this controller and some of the problems I've had. So yeah, the QA is a problem, and the fact that the syncing issues were also an issue. And what I found out is that port on the back was for updating the firmware, and it can also be used for direct input, but it doesn't tell you that in the instruction manual, which we'll talk about in a bit later. So yeah, that's a problem. Now, who's the idiot who put a USB port where the battery compartment is? Why not on the top? Even the cheap, like this GameSir one, they even knew, like, it goes here because where's the course? It's so stupid. And you know what? And here's where it becomes a little bit messed up. They say you can use direct input. I have not been able to get that to work with wireless, but what I have been able to get it work with is when it's plugged in with the USB. So technically, this thing allows wired play, but only through direct input, which is a shame, meaning you have to use the batteries. At least with the Xbox One controller, you have the option of buying a plug-in charge kit, which is $25, which is stupid, and then you need to pay another $25. So it's basically like $100 for a controller if you want a chargeable wireless controller for all your platforms. Anyway, but yeah, that is a bit of a shame. We're going to be going into the software side of things, and I'm going to be wrapping up more of my thoughts in the conclusion part of the video after that, because yeah, there are some problems. But overall, I think the hardware is pretty good. It's just the software. Oh boy. Let's talk about the software, shall we? Alright guys, so what you're looking at here is the SteelSeries Engine 3 menu. Now you need this piece of software in order to utilize X input from your controller, and I didn't explain it earlier, but X input is basically a way for your controller to be recognized by a lot of games. It's basically the new standard for driver software for your PC. Like before it was direct input, which is why I made a comment about it. You can play a lot of older games with direct input that you can't play with X input. X input, it's this current standard. It's what every PC gaming controller that is any good primarily uses. That's also new. So let's have a look at the menu. And we have some problems right away. Now, you don't see them, but I sure do. So now you might be thinking, like, wow, look at all these options. Like, you have sensitivity, you have dead zones. So right off the bat, sensitivity, any game, even like for controllers, like not just mouse, controllers, almost every game has some kind of sensitivity for analog sticks. So that's kind of meh. But the main thing is the dead zone configuration. Now, dead zones, for those of you who know, imagine pushing very lightly on your control stick, something like forward, but your character's still not moving on screen. But then you push a little bit more, and then suddenly your character's moving. So when it's not moving, it's in a dead zone. Now, a lot of software can let you configure this. A lot of platforms, like, for example, the PS4, they're being really cool with the dead zones in that a lot of developers are tweaking it so that even the slightest movement on the stick, even the slightest bit of pushing pressure, will cause a character to move or shoot. So basically, it adds for a lot more precision and accuracy. So you can make hair triggers, which, like for competitive games, that's really important. You don't want to press all the way down and shoot. You want to lightly tap the top, and then you'll be able to fire off. It's great for competitive play because the triggers are analog. So, again, the SteelSeries site claims you can basically do that, but it's very misleading. So right here, this is the maximum. This is the lowest amount you can go with the dead zones, and it's more like this, honestly. Like, this is incredibly misleading. It's not nearly like this. In fact, it's actually the same as other X-input controllers. You can only make the dead zone larger, which is incredibly disappointing and misleading. Same thing with these guys. So if you want to like push the controller all the way, the stick all the way forward to move, well, there you go. You can do that, I guess. You can make the argument it's good for disabled gamers. I'm going to say no, because dead zones are already pretty good to begin with, and they're already it's already very hard to do that, like, even accidentally, even if you have something like Tourette's, unless you're very aggressive with your controller. So that's the only reason why I can see it, is if you're very, very disabled. And even then, on the flip side, some disabled gamers have hard times moving their thumbs and their fingers. So having minimized dead zones is actually good for them. So, yeah, you can see my problem with the software. It's very incomplete. There's no options to rebind your controls. There's no option to switch to direct input directly from here, which would have been a great idea. You can set configurations, but just why when there's almost nothing here to set it for? Again, you can adjust sensitivity in-game. There's not really much of a point. It's so incredibly lazy and bare bones. I've never seen a piece of software like this that comes with a paid-for controller. It's terrible, and I bet, some of the features, of the Engine 3 is actually kind of good. I don't have any other peripherals to test it with. It's just specifically the Stratus XL is just bare bones and awful. There you have it, guys. Hardware-wise, I think this thing is really great. It has good triggers, good buttons, good analog sticks, a good D-pad, surprisingly. But software-wise, for $60, this thing is a joke. It's amazing that a company like SteelSeries, that is that big, could pump out such a crappy piece of software for their controller. And this is ignoring all the QA problems that I've had with this thing and many others have had online, even though I think we are in the vocal minority. But one of the biggest things is that a program like DS4 for Windows, which lets you use your DualShock 4 on Windows, is way more robust and feature-filled and also incredibly user-friendly. It's a great piece of software, and it's infinitely better than something developed and researched by a giant company like SteelSeries. Logitech's going through the same kind of thing. They were struggling really hard to get a proper working version of their gaming software onto the Windows 10 platform, which is what I've been using. And, it was a nightmare there, and now they're starting to fix it up, but they're still having tons and tons of user issues. And, that's not going to be... There are always going to be user issues, but the fact that there's so many, and I don't think it's a vocal minority. And especially when it just doesn't have as many features as something like DS4 for Windows, again. Now, a lot of these problems could have been alleviated if it wasn't for the manual. Yes, the manual. So, as you may have noticed, I've talked a lot about the features of this controller. There are more features listed on the box than there are how to utilize them in the SteelSeries Stratus XL manual. In fact, the manual points to the site for more information, which just shows a bunch of advertisements. All the manual tells you how to do is how to reset the controller through syncing and how to sync. It doesn't tell you how to use direct input. It doesn't tell you that USB port on the back is actually, get this, it's actually for updating the firmware for this thing. So the other controllers, I might have been able to fix them if I updated the firmware. I did it for this one, and I actually had that sync issue. But the other controllers might have been fixed if they told me in the manual to do that. I didn't even notice it until like the third controller I had. I took out the batteries and I just noticed like, oh, there's a port there. The manual doesn't make any notice of it. It's just a few pages with several different languages on it. And of course, because it's third party, it's SteelSeries, it's hard to find any information about this online unless you find it from other reviewers. So I've had to go on that, and I've had to discover the rest on my own. It's been a long, painful process, and I do not recommend going through it. Maybe if after seeing this video, you might understand it a little bit more, and you might see, like, going in, you might be able to get through some of the hurdles that I was going through, but again, I think it's a solidly built controller. It's just let down so much by the software. If they improve the software and some of their QA, I can probably wholeheartedly recommend this thing, because as it stands, unfortunately, the GameSir controller has more features, but it has less build quality. While this guy has problems in it of just connecting and like even being usable. It's just an absolute shame, because again, I think the hardware is great. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think of the video. What can I improve on? I'm always looking for feedback. And hopefully I'll be able to do some more control reviews in the future very soon, hopefully in June. I want to do like at least 1 or 2 more this month. But anyway, I'll see you guys next time. I'm out.